Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're going back in time to the 9th century, to a period known as the Carolingian Renaissance. It was a time of incredible intellectual energy and cultural flourishing. And what's really cool is that even something as simple as a letter could be a poetic masterpiece.
Yeah, it's true. Back then, a letter wasn't just a quick, hey, how you doing?
Hmm.
It could be a major production.
Oh, definitely. And that's exactly what we're looking at today. It's a letter from Gottschalk of Orbais to another big name of the era, Ratramnus.
And this letter is a great example of what I was just talking about. It's not just your average letter, right?
Right. It's the year 840 AD. Imagine you're Ratramnus, a respected scholar and monk. You go to your mailbox and you pull out a letter written entirely in verse.
Wow. I can't even imagine getting a letter like that today.
I know, right? And it all starts with Gottschalk calling on Cleo, the muse of history, to help him get his message across. What do you make of that?
Well, invoking a muse was pretty standard in classical poetry. It was a way to elevate your writing, connected to this long tradition of storytelling and knowledge. It's almost like Gottschalk saying, hey, even the muses are interested in this.
I like that. And it gets even more interesting when we see how Gottschalk praises Ratramnus. He calls him teacher, a famous and blight man, someone he truly loves deeply. It's a little over the top, don't you think?
It might seem that way to us now, but back in the Carolingian era, these expressions meant something more. They show us how important knowledge was and how strong the bond between a teacher and student could be.
Because books were super rare back then.
Exactly. If you had a mentor like Ratramnus, someone who could guide you, it was invaluable.
So it's less about flattery and more about respect.
Absolutely.
Gottschalk really admired Ratramnus, and he's not holding back. I mean, at one point, he even compares his desire for Ratramnus's writing to, like, someone dying of thirst or starving for food. That's pretty intense.
Definitely. Gottschalk desperately wants to tap into Ratramnus's wisdom. And he uses some very strong language to make that point. You see vivid metaphors, similes, and even anaphora.
Anaphora.
Oh, sorry, that's the repetition of phrases for emphasis. All of that is used to really highlight just how much Gottschalk is yearning for knowledge. He truly believes Ratramnus holds the key to unlocking even deeper understanding.
So we've got Gottschalk practically begging for knowledge here. But what is it exactly that he wants to pick Ratramnus's brain about? What's got him so fired up?
Well, he's really wrestling with this huge theological debate that was happening at the time. Predestination.
Predestination,
Yeah.
that's a big one.
It is. It's the idea that God has already decided who's going to heaven and who's not. Imagine the weight of your entire fate, pre-decided.
You said it. I can see why Gottschalk would be so eager to discuss this with someone like Ratramnus. This isn't exactly a topic you just casually bring up in conversation.
Not at all. And to really get why Gottschalk approached this the way he did, we need to consider the intellectual circles he was part of. He mentions Augustine of Hippo in the letter.
Augustine of Hippo, the giant of theology.
Exactly. Gottschalk's not messing around. He's done his research, and he's engaging with these really complex theological debates.
So he's trying to impress Ratramnus a bit, maybe prove that he's, like, worthy of his time and attention.
It's possible. But it also shows us this wasn't just a personal crisis of faith for Gottschalk. This was something that the greatest thinkers of that time were grappling with. And it's this context that makes his letter even more intriguing, wouldn't you say?
And here's where it gets even more interesting. Gottschalk doesn't just come out and say, hey, Ratramnus, what's the deal with predestination? He takes a very different approach.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? He lays it on pretty thick, calls himself dull in spirit, full of ignorance, says he's wavering on uncertain paths.
It's like he's putting on a show, like, oh, wise and brilliant Ratramnus, you're the only one who can save me from my cluelessness.
It makes you wonder, right? Is he being sincere? Or is this all a clever tactic to try to get Ratramnus hooked on his question?
Yeah, it's kind of a power move, isn't it?
For sure. Gottschalk's really playing up the intellectual hierarchy here. He clearly sees Ratramnus as a major player in this whole theological arena. But is he genuine in his self-deprecation? Or is there a hint of manipulation there? What do you think?
I don't know. It's like he's making a move in a game of chess, every word strategically chosen.
Exactly. And there's another layer to this, too. In the letter, Gottschalk reveals that he's already reached out to other scholars about predestination, some of them even more famous than Ratramnus, but he still hasn't found the answers he's looking for.
Wait, really? Who else did he contact?
Well, he name-dropped someone you might recognize, Lupus of Ferrières.
Oh, wow. Another giant of Carolingian scholarship. So it's not like Gottschalk is short on intellectual connections here.
Exactly. And by mentioning this, he's subtly lifting Ratramnus up even higher. Like saying, look, I've talked to the best of the best, but it's your perspective that I value the most.
Wow. That really says a lot about Ratramnus, doesn't it? Gottschalk clearly sees him as this intellectual heavyweight who can cut through all the theological noise and offer some real insight.
He does. You can almost picture Gottschalk on the edge of his seat, just anxiously waiting for Ratramnus to write back and share his wisdom.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? We don't actually know how Ratramnus responded.
We don't. That part of the conversation has been lost to history. It's frustrating, but that's how it goes sometimes.
Still, it's fun to imagine, you know? Was Ratramnus flattered by all this praise? Intrigued by Gottschalk's questions?
Totally. Now, we do know that Ratramnus did go on to write his own treatise on predestination.
Oh, really?
He did. But we'll never know for sure if Gottschalk's letter played a role in that.
It's tantalizing, isn't it? Did he take the bait, so to speak, or did he see through all of Gottschalk's carefully crafted prose?
Who knows? But that's part of what makes history so fascinating, right? All these unanswered questions.
It really makes you think about how much things have changed. Could you imagine having to write a poem every time you wanted to ask someone a question?
Right. Email starts to look pretty good then, doesn't it?
Totally. But honestly, there's something kind of cool about how much effort Gottschalk put into his letter. All those poetic flourishes, the carefully chosen words, it shows a real reverence for knowledge.
Definitely. It's like he's treating knowledge as this priceless treasure, not just, something you can Google in 5 seconds.
I know.
Which brings us to, I think, one of the key takeaways from this whole deep dive. This letter gives us such a vivid picture of what intellectual culture was like back then. The importance of mentorship, the art of eloquent discussion, the willingness to really wrestle with these big, complicated ideas.
Right. And even though the way we learn and share information is completely different now, that desire, that human need to learn and understand, that hasn't gone anywhere.
Exactly. So who knows, maybe this will inspire some of our listeners to go and explore the Carolingian Renaissance even more. There are so many fascinating stories waiting to be discovered from that era.
I think you're right. It just goes to show that even something as ordinary as a letter can open a window into a whole world of knowledge and intrigue. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And remember, there's always more to learn and explore, even if it means deciphering a little 9th century poetry along the way.